Welcome back to Kyubei Insight Lab. Today, we are going to talk about something that the mainstream financial press almost never discusses: the quiet, centuries-old financial architecture being built by Sephardic Jews, and why it matters more today than at any point in the last 100 years. Before we begin, let me be direct about what this video is not. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not an attack on any group. This is a geopolitical and financial analysis grounded in historical fact, publicly available data, and a recognition that understanding long-term structural patterns is the only way to see around corners. The conventional narrative about Jewish finance focuses almost entirely on the Ashkenazi model: Rothschild, Goldman Sachs, the Federal Reserve, AIPAC. But that framing misses an entirely different tradition, one with older roots, a radically different philosophy, and a far more sophisticated approach to the one risk that nation-states cannot solve for you. That risk is what happens when a nation-state itself fails. That is the Sephardic question, and in 2026, it is everyone's question. Part 1. The structural crisis of the Ashkenazi model. To understand why the Sephardic model is gaining attention now, we first need to understand why the Ashkenazi model is under stress. The Ashkenazi integration strategy was built for a specific set of conditions: a stable, rules-based Western order, upward mobility through meritocratic institutions, and the assumption that social acceptance, achieved through assimilation and intellectual achievement, could serve as a reliable form of protection. That model worked extraordinarily well for about 70 years. From the late 1940s through the early 2000s, Ashkenazi Jews in America rose to extraordinary prominence in law, medicine, academia, finance, and media. The strategy was become indispensable to the dominant system, outperform, integrate. But today, Michael Bitton, writing in the Sapir Journal in February 2026 under the title "The Future is Sephardic," makes the case that this model has run its course. Her argument is not a polemic. It is structural. In a deeply polarized America, where elite institutions are under assault from the right and from the progressive left simultaneously, where university campuses have become ideological battlegrounds, where Jewish identity itself has become a political flashpoint, the assimilationist strategy offers no stable foundation. You cannot assimilate into a center that no longer holds. Her 4 core arguments are worth stating clearly. First, schools and synagogues exist to support families, not the reverse. The institution serves the community. The community does not serve the institution. Second, Jewish organizations should be understood as communities built on the logic of family, not as civic associations or lobbying groups. The foundation is kinship, obligation, and continuity, not membership cards and annual galas. Third, spiritual life should be rooted in embodied reverence, not abstract intellectual identity. What you do, not just what you believe. And fourth, and this is the most pointed, an identity built on external approval is structurally fragile. If your sense of security depends on being accepted by the surrounding culture, then you're perpetually one cultural shift away from catastrophe. The American elite, Bitton observes, are now trying to relearn the Sephardic model. The flexible, resilient community structures that Sephardic Jews built in the Ottoman Empire, in the Netherlands, across the Mediterranean, those are the blueprints being studied again. Part 2. Who are the Sephardim, and what is their model? Let's step back into history. In 1492, the same year Columbus reached the Americas, the Spanish crown issued the Alhambra Decree, expelling all Jews from Spain. Estimates suggest between 100,000 and 300,000 people were forced to leave. 4 Sephardic Jews, whose name derives from Sepharad, the Hebrew word for Spain. This was the defining rupture. Where did they go? The Ottoman Empire opened its doors. Sultan Bayezid II reportedly said that the Spanish king had impoverished his own country while enriching ours. Sephardic communities established themselves in Aleppo, Constantinople, Thessaloniki, and throughout the Levant. They became merchants, court physicians, diplomats, financiers, indispensable to the empire. Another stream went to the Netherlands, which in the 17th century was the most religiously tolerant nation in Europe. The Bank of Amsterdam, founded in 1609, drew on Sephardic financial expertise and became the template for modern banking. The Bank of England, founded in 1694, was similarly connected to this network. And a hidden stream, the Marranos, or conversos, remained in Portugal and Spain, outwardly converting to Christianity while maintaining their Jewish faith and commercial networks in secret. It was these Portuguese Marranos who, in the 16th century, brought saltpeter and cotton to Japan, connecting the archipelago to global trade routes decades before the official opening of Japan's ports. The common thread in all of these trajectories is what I call the Sephardic Operating System: portability in network. Unlike the Ashkenazi model, which was ultimately built around gaining access to and influence within existing nation-state structures, the Sephardic model was built around the assumption that the state is unreliable, that any king can turn hostile, that any country can expel you tomorrow, that the only durable assets are ones you can carry with you: expertise, relationships, and capital that transcends borders. This is not a cynical philosophy. It is a survival-tested one. It was forged across 500 years of repeated expulsion from Spain, Portugal, England, France, and dozens of other territories, and refined through the practical experience of building prosperity in places where legal protection was never guaranteed. Part 3. The 12 Tribes and a Deeper Genealogy. Before we move to the modern applications of this model, let us briefly address the deeper historical genealogy, because it reframes the entire picture. The ancient kingdom of Israel split in approximately 930 BC into the northern kingdom, with 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom of Judah, comprising the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom was conquered by Assyria around 740 BC, and its 10 tribes were dispersed, giving rise to the historical mystery of the lost 10 tribes. The southern kingdom was later conquered by Babylon in 597 BC, and its people taken into captivity, but they were released by Cyrus the Great of Persia in 537 BC. It is from this southern lineage that the Sephardim trace their ancestry. The 10 tribes of the north, however, did not simply disappear. Historians and anthropologists have traced their movements across Central Asia, the Arabian Peninsula, Sub-Saharan Africa, and into East Asia. The tribe of Manasseh, described as a versatile guild of engineers, experts in metallurgy, civil engineering, sericulture, and medicine, shows striking parallels to the Hatta clan that migrated to Japan in the early centuries of the Common Era, introducing advanced silk weaving and construction techniques. The tribe of Dan, a maritime people, has left its name embedded in the geography of Denmark, Ireland, and the Danube River. The tribe of Gad, the ironclad vanguard in blacksmiths, has been linked by some scholars to the Mononoke clan in Japan and to the etymology of the word Mikado. These remain contested historical hypotheses, not established fact, but they point to something important. The ancient Israelite diaspora reached much farther than conventional Western historiography acknowledges. The boundaries between ancient Hebrew, Phoenician, Persian, and early Japanese civilizational elements are far more porous than they appear on a standard map. Part 4. The Political Architecture of Modern Israel, an ITS Sephardic blind spot. Now let us look at the present. When you map the current Israeli political landscape, a striking pattern emerges. The major parties, Likud under Netanyahu, Yesh Atid under Lapid, Religious Zionism under Smotrich, National Unity under Gantz, Yisrael Beitenu under Lieberman, are almost entirely led by Ashkenazim with roots in Hungary, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, and Moldova. Mizrahi representation comes mainly through Shas, a religious party drawing support from Moroccan, Iraqi, Iranian, and Tunisian Jewish communities. But the structural political power, the architecture of the state, is an Ashkenazi construction. This matters because Zionism itself was an Ashkenazi project. It was built on the European nation-state model, a defined territory, a unified people, a government, a military, a flag. The Ashkenazi experience of statelessness, of being perpetual minorities in European countries that could turn hostile at any moment, produced the Zionist response. We need a state of our own. But there was Ashkenazi opposition to Zionism from the very beginning. Edwin Samuel Montagu, the only Jewish member of the British cabinet at the time of the Balfour Declaration in 1917, argued forcefully against it. A Jewish state, he said, would actually endanger Jews by giving every country a reason to say, your country is Israel, go back there. He called Zionism anti-Semitic in its practical effect because it would other Jewish citizens in their countries of residence. The Sephardic view of Zionism has always been more ambivalent. For communities that survived for centuries without a state, thriving in the Ottoman Empire, in Amsterdam, in Aleppo, in Baghdad, in Shanghai, the idea that a nation-state is the solution to Jewish vulnerability was never as self-evident. And the events of 2023 and 2024 in Gaza have, in the eyes of many international observers, validated Montagu's warning in the most painful way possible. Part 5. The Sephardic Response, Sassoon, Safra, and the New Financial Infrastructure. So what are the major Sephardic financial families actually doing right now? Let us start with the Sassoon family. The Sassoons are Baghdad Sephardim, known in the 19th century as the Rothschilds of the East. Their commercial empire was built on trade networks across China, India, Hong Kong, and Singapore, and they were eventually ennobled by Queen Victoria. Their descendant institution, Sassoon Bank, announced in March 2026 that it is accelerating its expansion across Africa. The logic is straightforward. Western financial systems, built on dollar hegemony, correspondent banking networks, and SWIFT, are showing structural stress. Africa, with its young population, rapidly growing middle class, and enormous mineral wealth, represents the next frontier of real economic activity. The Sassoon model, a network closely tied to actual trade flows, not to financial derivatives built on financial derivatives, is precisely the right tool for that environment. Now, let us turn to the Safra family and the most significant single transaction in this story. In March 2025, Reuters reported that Safra Group was acquiring a majority stake in Saxo Bank. To understand why this matters, you need to understand both institutions. Safra is headquartered in Basel, Switzerland. It traces its origins to a bank established in Aleppo, Syria, by Sephardic Jews in the Ottoman Empire, which evolved into the Bank Saracen, one of Switzerland's oldest private banks, founded in 1841. In 2013, the Brazilian-based Safra Group acquired and merged with it. Today, it operates across more than 30 locations on 5 continents. Its capital position is extraordinary. The bank maintains a CET1 ratio, a measure of core capital strength relative to risk-weighted assets, of 34.5%. Compare that to JP Morgan Chase at 15.4%, HSBC at 14.8%, and Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group at 14%. By this metric, Safra is capitalized at more than twice the level of the world's largest banks. It is not just solvent. It is built to survive severe dislocations that would destroy conventional banks. Saxo Bank brings the other half of the equation. It is Denmark's leading online investment and trading platform, with 115 billion euros in assets under management, over 200 million API requests per day, and connectivity to 285 financial intermediaries worldwide. It is not simply a brokerage. It is the infrastructure layer through which financial institutions worldwide execute trades and access global markets. The combined entity will have customer assets exceeding $460 billion. But the strategic logic goes far beyond scale. The Safra family's stated ambition is BaaS, banking as a service. The fusion of a secretive, ultra-solvent private bank with a world-class open digital platform creates something the financial world has never quite seen before, a financial infrastructure provider that is simultaneously stable enough to weather systemic crises and agile enough to serve as the backbone of the next generation of digital finance. And here, the Sephardic philosophy becomes visible in the architecture. The Safra Group is on record with a statement that I find remarkably clear in its philosophy. We do not trust the pieces of paper issued by the state. We trust the function, the platform, that allows us to exchange those pieces of paper for anything at any time. Read that again. They're not betting on any particular currency. They're not betting on any particular country. They're betting on the infrastructure of exchange itself. They're acquiring the pipes, not the water that flows through them. This is portability operationalized at the institutional level. This is 5 centuries of Sephardic financial philosophy encoded into a 21st century financial architecture. Part 6. The post-petrodollar world and what comes next. The petrodollar system, in which oil-exporting nations price their exports in U.S. dollars and recycle those dollars into U.S. Treasury bonds, has been the foundation of American financial hegemony since the early 1970s. It is now under visible stress. Saudi Arabia has announced willingness to price oil in currencies other than the dollar. China and Russia have been aggressively building alternatives to SWIFT. The BRICS nations are actively discussing reserve currency alternatives. The dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves has been declining for over a decade. When the petrodollar system finally fractures, and the timing is uncertain, but the direction is not, the question is not whether the financial map will be redrawn. The question is who holds the infrastructure of the next system. The Ashkenazi model was built inside the petrodollar world. Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, the Federal Reserve, the IMF. These are all creatures of the dollar-based international financial order. When that order changes, their structural advantages change with it. The Sephardic model was built for exactly this kind of transition. For communities that have watched currencies collapse, empires fall, and financial systems implode, the Ottoman silver debasement, Weimar hyperinflation, Argentinian defaults, the Beirut banking collapse. The question is not which currency is safest, but how do we maintain the capacity to transact, preserve value, and move capital, regardless of which currency is dominant? The acquisition of Saxo Bank answers that question with precision. If you own the platform through which institutions in 50 countries execute trades, you remain essential regardless of whether those trades are denominated in dollars, euros, yuan, or some future digital reserve asset. The Sassoon family's Africa strategy answers it from the real economy side. If you control the trade finance networks through which African mineral exporters and importers transact, you maintain a position in the actual productive economy, independent of what happens in Western financial markets. Closing. The lesson for everyone. Let me close with a broader observation. The Sephardic story is not simply a Jewish story. It is a story about how communities, and by extension, how institutions and investors can be built to survive transitions that destroy the unprepared. The key insight is this. The most durable form of strategic positioning is not to bet on a particular currency, a particular country, or a particular technology. It is to own the infrastructure of exchange, the platforms, the networks, the trust relationships that remain essential regardless of which specific assets flow through them. In the language of modern strategy, it is better to own the railroad than any particular cargo. Better to own the port than any particular ship. Better to own the platform than any particular application. The Sephardim learned this lesson not in a business school, but through 500 years of forced adaptation, through expulsions, inquisitions, currency crises, and the collapse of empires they had helped to finance. In 2026, as the dollar-centric order shows signs of structural strain, as political polarization threatens the institutional frameworks that Ashkenazi integration strategy depended upon, and as new financial frontiers open in Africa and Asia, the Sephardic model is not simply relevant. It is arguably the only model that has already been stress-tested at historical scale. That is why the future may, in fact, be Sephardic. Thank you for watching. This is Kyubei Insight Lab.